that deals with the capital markets that I saw. I saw it in the year 2000 at Bitstream's exhibition at the Whitney, and I was really blown away. So, you know, it's great that John is around. Okay, come on. Here we have a piece by Fabio Ciaffarello called NASDAQ Voices, and the idea here is sort of like the opposite of the piece by Ben Rubin. It's to give voice to the stocks directly, as opposed to give voice to the people who trade the stocks. To think about what it means when the market does things that it seems to have its own life. So here the market is given the instruments and it's allowed to play. And we're going to show a fragment, not from the Madrid exhibition, but from the one that he did previously at the Sydney Opera House. So this is how it sounds. On the day of our exhibition, he does the concert live. So you know, we all gather around him on the day of the opening, and taking into account the difference in time between Madrid and New York, he played some of the prices of the NASDAQ, and he assigns an instrument to the stocks, to each stock. And what was really interesting is that the market had been down on that day, and so you know, there were a few. There wasn't a lot of animation in the piece. Some of the stocks, some of the instruments couldn't be played because the numbers were so low that you didn't have a note assigned to that number. And he was like, I'm sorry that, you know, this is not really, and you know, I said, look, this is fantastic. It really shows that you really don't have control over what you're playing. That it's really the market playing here. So that was a really interesting piece. We presented this one by Josh on. This is a visualization of the social networks created by joint membership of directors in boards of directors. So the claim is typically made in sociology and maybe less in economics that what you see companies do is really the result of a network, and that imputation of practices happens through the network. And the way to understand big companies is to really understand the networks of joint membership into boards. So each of these is a board, and if a board member sits on more than one, which they typically do, then they appear connected, as in this one. For example, all the scandals now that you see with the backdating of options, people paying themselves options, for choosing the day of the year in which the price is lowest so that the option can be highest. Well, this thing has typically spread out in companies through these networks. And so what the user can do is he can click and trace out the network for him or herself. This one is a piece by Uwe Morgan, Hans Bernhard, and Alessandro Ludovico Palocilio. And what it is it's called Google Word Itself. It's a reflection about financial bubbles. Bubbles are fascinating things. The market seems to take on its own volition, and it separates itself from reality, and then suddenly it crashes back. So in this piece, what Hans Bernhard did is he put a script on his website, and he had ads by Google, and so being paid for the ads. But then he created another script to falsify visits to the website, so he would be paid more than he was sort of like owed. And then he used that money to buy stock in Google. So sort of like artificially inflating Google. And I think it's a really interesting piece about just the sort of like self-referential dynamics that we saw during the dot-com years, where sometimes the whole point of a company was not to sell stuff, but to try to get its own stock go up. And so, I think that this is a piece that talks about that. Moving on, we have this piece by Antonio Montadas. This was technologically the least challenging. We had a few interesting headaches to set up the rest of the exhibition, but with this one, it's just a print. But the question is interesting. It says, how long would it take for $1,000 to disappear through a series of foreign exchanges? And Tadas, he's a Spanish artist. He works on the issue of translation and difficulties of crossing cultural boundaries and process of communication. And he sees currency change as an instance of that. So it's a really interesting piece that makes you think about just foreign exchange in a much broader framework. And finally, this is this is sort of like the layout that we had in the exhibition. You can very well see what's on the back. It was the piece by Fabio. Then we have the Hans Bernhard piece here. John's piece was there, and then behind the wall we had the index, the ticker, sorry. And then finally, so yeah, what does it mean to do art with finance? Like, how do you do it? And what is it art, or what is it? So thinking about it, we sort of like group these pieces into three overall themes. First, we call it representation. And what it is you use financial representation to problematize non-financial issues. So for example, with the web issue index of society, you use a ticker, but you don't represent stocks, you represent issues. Another way to approach the capital markets artistically, we call it revision. It's about just taking an artistic perspective on the financial markets. So for example, ecosystem, John's piece, it's about that. It's about how does an artist look at volatility? What does volatility mean? It's such an abstract concept, and yet it influences our lives. And so that's what he did, and I think that it allows people to think of volatility in a more profound way. And finally, rethinking. This is about challenging the economic fundamentals of the capital markets. Us as a collective, we typically don't go into issues with a frontal denunciation. We like to more discuss them. But it's good to have artists who just sort of like face on and reject the existing setup of things. And I think that perhaps the piece by Hans Bernhard on Google can be classified in this manner. And so we have been pushing and promoting and coming up with the concept of finance art. And after making a lot of noise, at least in Spain and in the continent with the exhibition, suddenly we found this definition came up in Wikipedia about finance art. So it's really cool. So anyway, it gives a little bit of legitimacy. So it's art that explores the information produced by the financial markets in a reflexive and artistic way. And so we add that elements of it that we think are important is that it is interactive, it's a virtual presence, some of them are electronic representations, and it deals typically with a large volume of information. Well, this is some of the press reaction that we got. This is the International Herald Tribune shares a thing of beauty. This is another piece that we have here, which, by the way, I just forgot to mention, but it's a piece by Lisa Ottolina and Joshua Porway. Where did this go? Okay. Anyway, so this piece is called Black Shoals. Actually, it's good that the photo was there. It's called Black Shoals, and what it does is it's a planetarium, and the stars represent stocks, and the light in the relative luminosity of the star is a representation of the market capitalization, whether the price is going up or down. And then on top of it, it creates some creatures that feed off the light, which would correspond to the traders that we can see, the people that I started with my dissertation. It's a really interesting piece, and it was already on. It was exhibited at the Tate Gallery, and when the Enron, when Enron exploded, they could check in real time how was the stock market planetarium dealing with it, and amazingly, it actually showed kind of like a supernova, so sort of like an explosion of white light that took over a big chunk of the planetarium. So very cool. Finally, more stuff that we did. We did this workshop. We put 4 of the artists or 5 of the artists who have come to the opening and 5 finance academics